Good evening, everyone. I am pleased that the Saskatchewan Book Awards is partnering once again with the Saskatchewan Festival of Words on its special 25th anniversary. And it is great to be here in Moose Jaw and in person on such a landmark anniversary. In addition to the sponsors, I would like to thank the Canada Council for the Arts for allowing us to bring to you 3 excellent 2021 Saskatchewan Book Author nominated authors. Our first author this evening is Gillian Harding-Russel. A Regina poet, editor, and reviewer, Gillian has published in journals across Canada, and her poems have been anthologized in 17 collections. Her previous poetry collection, In Another Era, published by Radiant Press in 2018, was shortlisted for a City of Regina Saskatchewan Book Award. Her work has been shortlisted for the Thomas Morton Award and has won in the Grit Lit and the Exiles Gwendolyn McEwen chapbook competitions. Uninterrupted is her 5th poetry collection published by Stasis Editions, and she will be reading from that this evening. I'm also pleased to introduce Cort Dogniez, a graduate of the Indian Teacher Education Program. Cort has a Bachelor of Education degree and a postgraduate diploma in Native Studies. His teaching career has spanned 41 years, with 5 years at the Greater Saskatoon Catholic Schools and 5 as an independent education consultant as coordinator of First Nations, Inuit, and Métis education. Cort supported teachers in the inclusion of Métis and First Nations content and perspectives while providing leadership to develop culturally responsive schools. This evening, Cort will be reading from his SBA shortlisted book, Road to La Prairie Ronde. Our final author this evening is Bevann Fox. Bevann is a proud member of Pasqua First Nation. She received her BA and MBA from the University of Regina. Bevann has been honored with the YWCA Women of Distinction Award in the Arts, Culture, and Heritage category. She is also the founder, producer, and co-host of Access TV's The Four. This evening, Bevann will be reading from Genocidal Love, A Life After Residential Schools. Please give all the authors a warm welcome this evening.
Hello, everybody. I cannot believe we're here, and I'm looking out at Bob Curry. So nice. I feel kind of emotional to be back in the building. This is my first live event since that March that we all remember so well when everything went wrong, and it's so special to me that the first live event I'm at is here in my, oh my gosh, I am emotional, in my beautiful home of Moose Jaw. As soon as Sarah asked me if I would come, I've just been saying, I'm going home, I'm going home, I'm going home. And I don't even say that when I go back to Fernie, where I live, where I've lived for 15 years. But I left Moose Jaw in the 80s, and it's still home, and it will always be home. And part of the reason that I'm so proud of it, and that I'm so proud to call it home, is because of this beautiful festival and all the beautiful people who make it happen, whether it's the staff or the board or, Gary Highland, who helped make this beautiful venue possible, all the people who show up every year. So I'm happy to be here. My name is Angie Abdu, if I didn't say that. I'm an author and a university professor and a tower jumper. I jumped off the natatorium tower today. I was so proud of myself. I haven't done that since I was 16, but my daughter trash talked me into it. So I'm never doing it again, ever. I'm happy to be home, as I said, in what is known as Treaty 4 territory, the original lands of the Cree, the Ojibwe, the Saulteaux, the Dakota, the Nakota, the Lakota, and the Métis people. As I've been doing that land acknowledgement this week, I've been trying to, it feels very hollow to me to just do a land acknowledgement, so I've been trying to suggest things that we can do to accompany the land acknowledgement to make it more meaningful. And one of the things I've been talking about is ways that we can educate ourselves. So this is especially relevant today when we have 2 authors who are going to educate us about various Indigenous issues. So that is a nice accompaniment to a land acknowledgement in these especially sensitive times. I'm grateful to be a part of this progressive festival, which always works to be more inclusive and accessible and representative of a diverse range of voices. It also works consciously to move forward from the horrors of the past in a spirit of collaboration and reconciliation with Indigenous peoples. Of course, this wonderful festival couldn't happen without sponsors, especially important again during COVID. So thank you to the Saskatchewan Arts and Culture, Saskatchewan Lotteries, Canada Council of Arts, the Government of Canada, and a long list of funders on the program. Please have a look at the list and thank those sponsors if you see them around town. There's going to be 3 readings. I'm just going to introduce each one and then have them read, and then I'll introduce the next. So we're going to start with Gillian Harding-Russel next to me. Gillian is an acclaimed poet and accomplished literary scholar. She has a Master's of Arts from McGill University, which she focused on the 19th century novel. And she has a PhD from University of Saskatchewan, where she wrote a dissertation on the mythopoetic aspect in postmodern Canadian poetry, particularly the poems of Gwendolyn McEwen and Michael Ondaatje. Gillian has been the editor for Event magazine, where she still works as a manuscript consultant and a reviewer for a number of Canadian literary magazines. She's published 6 chapbooks, and this is her 5th collection of poetry. It's called Uninterrupted. It was published this year. Both it and her previous book, In Another Air, were both shortlisted for Saskatchewan Book Awards. Of the new book, Uninterrupted, David Zeros says, "These poems reward the reader with panoramic images of the natural and unnatural world. Her description is almost visionary in its exactness, with questions that are challenging, incisive, puzzled, and unanswerable." Welcome, Gillian.
Thank you, Angie. I would like to thank the Moose Jaw Festival of Words and Lucinda McLean and Emily Pinter and Amanda Farnell, all of whom I corresponded with through email, the Saskatchewan Book Awards, and Cam Teo and the Saskatchewan Arts Board, from whom I received a grant in 2015, and Ecstasis Editions, my publisher. I also would like to acknowledge that I'm writing on Treaty 4 territory, and to thank the other readers, Cort Dogniez and Bevann Fox. Uninterrupted is about nature and human nature during the Anthropocene, and the poems are sometimes speculative and dystopic, but are written out of a love for what could be lost. The book is dedicated to my brother, a biological oceanographer who has long been concerned with global warming. For one of his projects, he recently collaborated with younger oceanographers to chart the rapidity of the ice caps melting, since he carried out research in the Arctic during the 60s in the Beaufort Sea and on an ice island, Fletcher's Island, which has since disappeared, that ice island. I started this collection a long time ago, in fact. It was sort of a side project. And in fact, the first poem I wrote, Molten Misery and Chthonic Ends, was provoked by the BP oil spill in the Gulf of Mexico in 2010. And the most recent, Solace, was written in 2020, following forest fires in Australia and Canada. Now, of course, we're having our own fires here right now, even just north of here. The collection is divided into 7 sections. What Was Real to Be Afraid was written after several camping trips to Banff and focuses on a need for something larger than oneself that we may find in nature. And Uninterrupted is about nature and its complexity as it once flourished, uninterrupted, and as it persists despite the odds, even though some of us are doing our best to undermine it. And this is the title section and focuses on the prairies. Strange weather dramatizes internal weather or psychological weather as it influences our actions and interactions with nature. And Terra Poems, this section is particularly speculative and dystopic, and they are written as a backward and forward seeing and as a warning. In the epigram to this section, Letter to a Future Generation, Gwendolyn McEwen writes that the letter, quote, was made for you to burn, that its meaning lies only in your burning it. And that is my intention too. The next section, Missions Then and Now, range from meteorological events such as the eruption of Mount Tambora in 1815 that disturbed weather patterns in Europe for decades, to small human acts to help nature, such as in the poem Heron. The biologist spends the night on the beach to rescue a heron trapped with a tin can stuck over its bill. Meditation on diverse species is a meditation on species ranging from perceived pests such as ticks, mosquitoes, and dung beetles to the disappearance of whole species such as the passenger pigeon, which once appeared as a purple cloud in the sky. Closing Earth Songs acts as a kind of epilogue at the end of the collection, and there is a dialogue between humans and sea animals in a nursery rhyme to the sea. Elegy for water and ourselves reflects on our contamination of the water supply that gives us life. And Solace is a lament for all the animals lost in forest fires. Humans cannot survive without other animals any more than we can survive without each other. And so the first poem I'll read comes from Terra Poems. Sounds like terrified. And this poem first appeared in The Goose, a journal of arts, environment, and culture in Canada. Ouroboros. A puce underbelly of smog coiled round the city, sticking the low cement, high-flung metal surfaces, dirt-speckled, tall coppery windows of tempered glass, rising sullen and toothy on the skyline, frozen in time and weathers, harmlessly there each day. When a citizen cocked his head at a magenta cumulonimbus wound round the leaning heads of skyscrapers, the sky was toppling. Everyone had heard that panic attack story, so annoyed at the alarmist, someone said, "Take an orange or a blue pill," and turned back to what she'd been doing, a fug of fear, it's true, smothering lucid thought. It had been an opaque, cold spring, continuing in this defensive frame, doing what they were used to accumulate happiness against gusty, bad, unpredictable weather in digits registered on plastic and stored on liquid crystal screens made most cleverly of arsenic and lead. Their vehicles outside double weather doors, billowing in a sooty puff of exhaust on the parking lot under a broad building with the long bronze eyes, where they navigated it in the half-light of half-care, working every day, 8 till 4, waiting for the Friday off. When, briefly, the news. The planet has warmed by 3 degrees, and the ice caps in the forest fire carboniferous sunset are melting like tiger ice cream. Sensationalist, a person beside me at work remarked, obviously wrong-headed, since yesterday they'd announced a hole in the sky supposed to have been patched up, melting like ice cream, and this is the coldest spring on record. Here it was July, a lopsided ophidian cloud spitting ice pellets, and as I looked out the window, a brown animal sliminess slithered by in a squelching way, though it could have been the sudden movement of my eyes glancing back at it. And the next poem I've decided to read is from Strange Weather, Psychological Weather. There's a rat. I'm certain I've heard it in the attic of continuing anxieties, or maybe it's in the basement of postponed thought. But so pervasive is this rodent that is eating us out of home and planet, out of the grasslands and boreal forests and ocean, which long ago ate a dodo, part of a buffalo, a whooping crane, and has its appetite set on a pipit and a godwit, a swift fox, a burrowing owl, and a woodland caribou. Has even tackled an octopus, I hear, who, scratching its recently proclaimed sentient head, complained, "Why, I am sinewy and cannot be good to eat." So the creature escaped extinction, blaming my neighbor with this exploratory taste, though he says he is just getting by with the gnaw he was born to, that he has needs, doesn't waste. But I've seen the gaudy rags of sloughed-off clothes and plastic bags, small skulls of coffee pods, unidentified corpses at my feet. There is a rat in my head that won't leave me be satisfied until I've tried every animal on the menu, emptied every mind to fuel my curiosity, to manufacture my whimsies and addictions, each adorned with colorful, indestructible obsessions, so I may fly like a god or the world's largest predator, but condemn the disaster site below, cratered land and rainforest hacked away for Java and manna plantations. Look all around as we move to another strip cleared for me to land. I would spare a songbird, which will die in the collateral, genetically engineer a turkey that, unhappy, trips over its own meaty chest. But when I observe these truths to one of the other rats in the community, for we've all become one rat, consumed with enormous hunger and self-preoccupation and disregard, he typically gets red in the face, spits out, "So what? Get a life. The economy will suffer." Or is it, "Speak for yourself"? And I do. I look at myself afraid of the knot in my guts that keeps me doing what I have always done, rushing here and now there along well-oiled ruts, a fellow flash of teeth reaching into my heart, when all I want is a logical and easier way out. And next poem I'll read comes from Closing Earth Songs. And this poem was also published in the Goose. Elegy for Water and Ourselves. Water the color of sky on a kind day, we celebrate. Water the rose opaque of smoke when there are forest fires, we regard with caution and may secretly admire. Water the hue of puce clouds in the gloom of wet weather, and the color of the raw earth it travels through in river arteries and veins, visited by the green populations that make it their summer home, we might ignore. Water traveling our arteries past rocks and waterfalls, or back up the blue estuaries to enter the heart's valves and chambers. Water is our medium. Without it, there is no life, no movement towards or away. Water is our source, crystal as first lakes, chlorine ammonia tasting today in silver taps, or at its most elemental, drinking through the long, cool throat of a well on a hot day. But water is all colors, and every well has its taste and darkness, and each district's character reflects ourselves. Our sewage effluent or agricultural runoff, pesticides or Roundup, iron or mercury, arsenic slurry or PCB tailings from the mines, a rainbow slick on the water's mirror from the metal shunt carrying black blood under a major river artery. All we have consumed, antibiotics last Wednesday or estrogen in pills a decade ago, insulin daily or ephedrine seasonally, Prozac or Red Bull that has traveled through our bodies and been rejected, subsumed in the lagoon of liver and kidney, returns to the water that feeds us, muddying or complicating, altering its essence, our essence. And so water that is our life may be our destruction, and we may be our own destroyers. I have one more poem here, and this one also comes from Closing Earth Songs, and it's entitled Solus, S-O-L-U-S, meaning alone in Latin, although it sounds very much like Solus Comfort, S-O-L-A-C-E. And this poem I wrote after forest fires in Australia, and so many animals had perished, and also we have had our own fires. And we had a fire actually in this very field where the poem is set. Solus. What would all the beauty in the world mean to me if I were the last and only, none to share its joy? As I walk through the steepled and tasseled grasses, alive with cricket voice, and a grasshopper bopped into my knee, a pair of citron butterflies waltzing low over the dewy sunrise, pastel and mottled peach in the east. I turned to you beside me. Look, I said, but remembered you were away on a trip, and I was left alone with the field's crazed symphony under the sky. As I stood on the slant of asphalt driveway to slide the garbage onto the street, a gash of persimmon from forest fires in the western wedge of sky above the houses, and the sun was a pomegranate eye, frightening beauty in its awfulness and threat. I turned to you again to lessen its terrible spell on my tightening chest, and was relieved you were once more standing there. Just think, if we alone stood without a wild heartbeat and no wilderness left, the earth denuded of its natural inhabitants, would we feel the rightful citizens of a planet so bereft? Thank you very much.
Thank you, Gillian. It's a very powerful reading from what is a very powerful book. I highly recommend everyone checks out the whole book. Tim is here selling from Post Horizon Books out front, so you can buy any of the books throughout the festival. This book the poems are, as you got a taste of, they're alarming and urgent, and they remind us that we have a lot of reason to be alarmed and need to act urgently, and you can see why it was recognized with the Saskatchewan Book Awards, as was her last book, so congratulations for that. Next up, Cort is going to read for us. He is a proud Métis man, and as introduced at the beginning, he was shortlisted for a Saskatchewan Book Award for his first book, Road to La Prairie Ronde, and I just found out that he had a whole career as a school teacher before he decided to write down some family history, and is already an acclaimed writer. Congratulations for your quick success. The book takes the reader on an imagined journey of his ancestor, Frederick Dumont, from Batoche to Métis settlement today known as Brown Prairie. Cort is a relative of Gabriel Dumont, and the book takes place just before the tragic events of the 1885 resistance. It's been called a charming coming-of-age story that is elegantly illustrated, and on the theme of education, which I mentioned at the start, the book contains a whole series of resources for readers and students and educators to teach them more about traditional Métis life ways and history, particularly for younger readers, which was identified as a gap in books available about the Métis history. And
Awesome.
You're going to read for us.
Yeah,
Thank you.
well, thank you. And thank you to the Saskatchewan Festival of Words for inviting me here today, and for the Saskatchewan Book Awards for the nomination. I feel very blessed. I know that's just sitting here right now. I know if my Kokam was here, she would have said wah wah. That's what she would have said in terms of your poems and the passion that comes through them, in terms of the relationship to the land. You know, for us, the land is everything. That relationship is so powerful, and so your poems really convey that. And so I thank you for that. All right, so in terms of my book, I was born and raised in Saskatoon and spent a whole lot of time with my Kokam. And my Kokam was a storyteller. And so I was really blessed and very lucky to be able to hear those stories of our history and our family, but also her stories, even in terms of our tricksters, all of that, I was immersed in. And I was really fortunate that I internalized those stories, and as an educator, could then share them with my students. One of the sad aspects of our society is that we don't know a heck of a lot about the Métis people. Who are Métis? What is a Métis person? You know, those sorts of things are out there, and people really don't know our story. And I find that with students, many of them will be taken to Batoche, and they see us through the lens of the resistance, and they see us, and words that get thrown around in terms of us being rebellious, that sort of thing. And I didn't want students to have that. And one of the things that many teachers said to me was that the literature that's available for students is above the reading level of grade 4 students. And so when I retired, one of the first things I wanted to do was to share my family story and give students an opportunity to hear about Métis people, but to humanize us, to make us real, and to share just events about our culture and our history and our life, and to know that there's a connection between the past and the present, that we didn't just disappear after the resistance, that we're here today. And that was my purpose with this story. I wanted to start by telling the story of my Kokam's father, Frederick Dumont. And so that's what this story is about. And it was about making a connection to Ronde Prairie, or La Prairie Ronde, which is a Métis community that's just outside of Saskatoon, right next door to Whitecap Dakota First Nation. Back in the day, it was called Moose Woods. That's how my kokum knew that location and those people that she had relationship with. Chief Whitecap was called Wapahaska, and so I make sure that in the book that I'm not just using Cree, but when I'm talking about the people, that I'm using that language as well. So for the Dakota people, I wanted to honor that. And so this book, the part that I'm going to read you first of all, is about them meeting two Dakota men on the road. So Frederick wants to join Gabriel Dumont and his brother Isidore on a trip back to Round Prairie where their father is at that time. And Frederick sees an opportunity, and so he begs his grandfather Isidore to let him go and have an adventure. And Isidore agrees. And so Frederick is really, really excited about going on the road. So this first part is them meeting these two Dakota men and the circumstances of that meeting. On the evening of the first day of their journey, it wasn't settlers or anyone from the three nations that the Dumonts encountered on the road to La Prairie Ronde. Instead, it was two Dakota men traveling on horseback who met them on the trail. And it was a lucky thing, too. Isidore had been driving the cart when they needed to cross a boggy area in the road. Somehow, a cartwheel became trapped between two rocks hidden in the mud. They tried to use the extra horses to pull the cart free, but the rope broke, and now the women and men had to work together to free the cart. Frederick was the first to notice the Dakota men and was sent to ask them for assistance. The two strangers quickly recognized the trouble and joined in to rescue the cart. While the men rocked the cart back and forth, the women and Frederick were pulling hard on the cart horse's reins, hoping to free the wheel. A strong push from the four men freed the stubborn wheel, lurching the cart suddenly forward. Frederick let out a loud cheer, which immediately turned to laughter when he saw what had happened to Kokum and Tante Madeleine. The two women had been pulling with all their might and were suddenly thrown backwards into the muck and mire. They were now sitting in the middle of the road, covered in mud. The women shot a disapproving look at Frederick, who was immediately silenced, while the other men looked away, knowing better than to laugh. While the Dakota men led the horse and cart to firmer ground, Gabriel and Isidore helped their shocked wives regain their balance and climb out of the mud hole. When everyone was safe and sound, the men set up camp while the women cleaned themselves up. The Dakota men were thanked and invited to stay for supper, and it was fortunate that the Dumont men spoke several indigenous languages and could communicate easily with the Dakota hunters. Frederick listened eagerly to the conversation between the four men. He learned that they were members of Chief Wapahaska's band and were headed to Moose Woods, where their newly formed reserve was now located. Moose Woods was very close to La Prairie Ronde, which made the Dakota and Métis neighbors. The Dakota and Métis already had a long-standing relationship of peace and friendship and had even traveled on buffalo hunts together. It seemed today's meeting was meant to be, and they all agreed to continue on their journey together. The illustrator of this book is Jade McDougall, and I know you can't see it from there, but she has done some brilliant illustrations, particularly of the two women when the cart lurches forward and they're thrown into the mud. So if you get an opportunity to buy the book, you can see the brilliant illustrations that are done here. The second part of the story I want to tell you about is later on. And so as they're traveling to Round Prairie, they have to pass through this location, Saskatoon. But it wasn't Saskatoon at that time in 1883. It hadn't even been settled yet by European settlers. It had been settled by Métis people, and that was part of their territory. So this is the story of them passing through Saskatoon, the Saskatoon area. This story is about Gabriel Dumont riding a buffalo in the Saskatoon River Valley, and it's a true story. And so I wanted to incorporate that into my story, and at the beginning of this book, Frederick dreams of being a buffalo hunter, but he already knows that the buffalo are gone, and the chances of that are slim and none. And so he's disheartened by that, but also, he's 12 years old, so he's very, very, very hopeful. So this is the next part of the story. It was late on the second day when the traveling party entered into the region known by the Métis as Bois de Flèche. So Saskatoon was called Bois de Flèche by the Métis. One of the Dakota men pointed out a site on the opposite side of the river, and he told the story about a settler leader who met with Chief Wapahaska to ask advice on a good location to establish a settlement for his people. The newcomers would soon arrive from the east, and he needed to find a place for them to settle that had good farmland, clean drinking water, and a place to safely cross the river. Chief Wapahaska had shown them this site. The Métis were already well familiar with this area and agreed that it would be a great place to live. It was Miocin. Miocin means it's beautiful. All of a sudden, Gabriel reined in his horse and held up his arm. It was a hunting signal everybody recognized immediately. The men dismounted from their horses while the cart was hidden behind a bluff of chokecherry trees. Frederick's heart was pounding as he joined the men to find out what Uncle Gabriel had seen. Could this be the adventure Frederick had been hoping for at the start of the journey? Everyone crouched and scanned the river valley as Gabriel pointed out 2 buffalo grazing amongst the bushes. This was truly a miracle, as buffalo were so scarce, especially in this area. As luck would have it, they were upwind of the buffalo, and the short-sighted animals were unaware of their presence. Gabriel reminded the men of the rules of the hunt. Nobody starts the charge until I give the signal. We work as teams, and we share whatever we harvest. Each man moved silently to an arranged position and waited for the signal. Frederick was thrilled when his grandfather said he could join him. Kist you marcy, musham. Today, Frederick would be a real buffalo hunter. With all eyes on Gabriel, they readied themselves for the charge. Suddenly, Gabriel's arm went up, and the Dakota men spurred their horses towards the buffalo. Their thundering hooves alerted the animals, and the buffalo immediately turned and ran down the length of the river valley. Gabriel had predicted their movement, so Isidore and Frederick were waiting ahead of them with their guns ready. They both fired a shot, and the buffalo immediately changed direction. One went straight towards the Dakota men, who fired and brought down the first buffalo. The large bull charged directly at Gabriel. Frederick thought it was like a dream in slow motion. Uncle Gabriel took calm and deliberate aim and then fired directly at the huge animal. The shot echoed in the valley, and Frederick watched in awe as the bull fell almost directly in front of Gabriel. As Frederick raised his gun in a victory sign, he thought his chest would burst with pride and excitement. Gabriel returned the victory sign, and then surprisingly, he climbed onto the back of the enormous bull as if to pose for a celebration photograph. Suddenly, the buffalo rose to its feet, with Gabriel desperately clutching at the long hairs around its neck. Like a bucking bronco, the bull charged away, and Gabriel hung on for dear life. Frederick and the rest of the travelers watched in awe as the Métis cowboy bounced and swayed on the buffalo's back until the bull collapsed one final time. Gabriel gingerly dismounted and took a few deep breaths. He checked to make sure the animal was dead, and then raised his fist and let out an enthusiastic whoop. Frederick and the men ran to congratulate him, while Madeline hugged him and then shook her finger at him and said, "You are always doing something to scare me." Ekose, that's it.
Thank you so much. I can think of a few elementary school readers who I will be getting this book for, so thank you for it.
Cool, thank you.
So all 3 of these writers are their first time at the Saskatchewan Festival of Words, so that's exciting. And what a year to be here, the 25th anniversary. I don't know if I mentioned that at the start, but it's the 25th anniversary. Isn't that something? What an accomplishment. So congratulations to everyone who's gone that far. I remember coming for the first festival. I would have been 26 years old, I guess, and I was living in Ontario, going to graduate school at Western, and my mom said there's going to be a literary festival in Moose Jaw, so I got on a plane and came home, and I just remember sitting out in Crescent Park in the beautiful sunshine and people everywhere, and being just starry-eyed to be around Lorna Crozier and Bonnie Bernard and David Carpenter and all these Saskatchewan writers, and just feeling like, how lucky am I to be rubbing shoulders with people so brilliant and creative, and I still feel that way every time I come here. So thank you to the people who make it happen and continue to make it happen for 25 years. Wonderful. Our next reader is Bevann Fox. Bevann's book is Genocidal Love. It led the Saskatchewan Book Awards nominations. There's 14 prizes available in a multiplicity of genres, and her book was nominated for 6 of those prizes. It won the Saskatchewan Publishing Award. The book is a blend of biography and fiction. So the character is a girl called Myrtle, who was sent to the residential school at 7 years old and suffered a horrible abuse and the trauma that comes from that. Perhaps Bevann will talk about the blend of fiction and biography, or if she doesn't, maybe we can ask questions at the end, because there will be time for a Q&A. Myrtle does find healing, and she discovers her voice and the power of storytelling. So it's not, I mean, it is a harrowing book, of course, but it also has hope and actually humor and a lot of resilience and strength. But you won't be surprised about the resilience and power as you get to know Bevann. You will see where that came from. So Myrtle finds a way forward for a better future for her children and her grandchildren. And I think Bevann said before we came out here that that's who she wrote the book for, is her children and grandchildren. She's a member of the Pasqua First Nation with a master's in business administration from the University of Regina. In the preface, Bevann writes, "The character Myrtle is bigger than my own personal story. She represents thousands of other First Nation girls and First Nations women. The book is widely heralded as a crucially important story for all readers."
Thank you. That's an incredible introduction. And I want to say happy anniversary to the Festival of Words. And thank you, Sask Book Awards, Saskatchewan Book Awards. And it's amazing sitting here with these incredible authors. I'm just listening here, and I thought, oh my God, I'm next. I got to go next here. And yeah, I wrote this book in hopes that my children and grandchildren, if they went through difficult times, that they could break cycles if they're having any trauma, because this has been a long healing for me. And in my reading, my voice I might get choked up a bit, but bear with me, I'll take a breath. Because it is very, if you read this book, you'll go on a journey with Myrtle, the character. And I went to the Labret Residential School near Fort Capel in 1964. I was 7 years old when my grandparents took me there. But I thought I was going to the Queen's School. I thought I was going to meet the Queen because of the treaties, because the Queen promised for all this, our rich lands, education, health. I think there was even a medicine chest or something in there, even gunpowder, twine. Like there's all these promises, but the big one, the education. And here we were put in these red brick schools, and they all looked the same. So I thought I was going to meet this beautiful queen. So I'll just start here. Okay, bear with me here. I'll read two parts. Oh, and there might be some swearing in here, or some real detailed graphic. So, just a warning. Okay. Nimisom means my grandfather, and Nokam means my grandmother in Cree. My grandparents were Cree. Amazing, they spoke Michif, which is French Cree, right? Yeah. Michif, German, Soto, Cree, and what was the other one? Those 4 languages they spoke. And do you think I could speak any of it? Because of the school, right? It was so, sometimes it comes back to me and I'll speak and I'll phone my aunt right away, my great aunt. She's 93 years old, she's fluent, and I'll talk with her. While I remember and it's there, then it'll go away. So when those times come, that's when I call my aunt. Okay, so here goes. Genocidal love. My children were taken from me. My mother took them into her care, and I was on a police order to not go near my mother's home. My husband left me for someone else. By this time, there were no more chances for me. I quit my business college studies. I walked around in blackouts and woke up in strange places. Once I found myself driving down the highway on the wrong side of the road. I had lost everything, my children, my husband, my home, my job, and my self-respect. I had no one. My only consolation was that my children were safe with their grandmother. Myrtle, do you think you have a problem with alcohol? Asked a lady from the crisis service center. I cried and for the first time admitted, yes, I do have a problem. I was taken to the hospital and was registered in a detox center for a month. Slowly, I got my life back. I found a job and got a new apartment. After a year, I was able to see my children, providing I attended parenting classes to learn some parenting skills and self-help groups to build positive self-esteem. I went back to university. It was a struggle, but I didn't quit. I was determined to make a home for my children and for myself. I completed my degree and found a good job at a bank. The children came home again, and I continued with parenting classes, counseling. I painted beautiful acrylics on canvas, and my creative ability grew. As I succeeded, my children succeeded. The parenting courses helped a lot. I lived off the food bank and welfare until I was set in my career, but I found good work after finishing university, and I vowed never to be on welfare again. I wanted my children to have everything, and they did. I never wanted them to go hungry like I did in the boarding school. My home was filled with love and protection for my children. They had a good home, wore the best clothes, and their lives were busy with sports and other activities. I looked after my children without the help of their father. He avoided all maintenance orders and was somehow able to delay the legal process endlessly. So I provided for my children with the help of my mother and my Aunt Verna, the 93-year-old in the home, my great aunt. It was a struggle and disappointment that the courts allowed him to delay paying me child support. Ultimately, he did not have to pay child support at all. He was a deadbeat dad. I gave up with all the legal process because it required too much energy when all he thought was avoiding all responsibility for our children. My mother and my aunt kept us together as a family. My mother looked after the children while I worked, went to school, took extra training. I was fortunate to have loving, caring grandmothers help me with the children. One day, my son Wade asked, "Mom, how come you never hug Nocum or call her Mom or tell her you love her?" I had never really thought of it before, but I tried to be more affectionate with my mother from that point on. It felt strange at first, but later became natural for hugs and kisses with my mom, and I felt gratitude to my son and often thanked him for pointing that out. But after 3 years, I began to feel depressed again and slept all the time. My allergy symptoms grew, and soon I was allergic to everything, including foods, smoke, tea, and even coffee. Although I was slowly getting sicker and sicker, I maintained a good home for my children. I made sure they were involved in many activities. I enjoyed and loved my family so much and wanted badly to provide for them. Yet something in me was not right. I had nightmares of my body burning from someone's touch. I had nightmares. The same nightmare over and over, a nightmare within a nightmare. I struggled to wake up. I tried to scream, but I had no voice. The voice had been taken from me. They took my innocence, my language, and my pride, and replaced it with shame and degradation. The father who touched me had violated my very existence. He had burned me, scarred me. It was hell, and it seared with pain. A foul beast came into my dream. He looked monstrous. It left me with a terrifying feeling that lingered with me for days. I tried to go about my normal life, but my body ached and burned with pain. I did not know the difference between real and not real. I faked it in the real world, pretending to be well. I had to survive. I wrote in my red journal, I was out there walking around in this pain, drinking, drugging, not really living, only existing on the air that I breathe. There is a rage inside. It can be very confusing if I let it take hold of my moment. It paralyzes me from moving on to other things throughout the day. Cry. Go ahead and cry. Like I never cried before. I keep crying until I can't cry anymore. I feel so wonderful and free. Often I must trust me, and it feels peaceful after I'm done. But why am I crying? Maybe someday I will know, I will tell, but I need to cry for whatever it is, something, me. The memory of the priest and nun joggled out of my mind like a memory within a memory as I sat in my living room staring at the muted television. My thoughts went back there, too many years ago, to many years ago, as I drank bottled water and breathed, listened to the whistling of my breath in the back of my throat. I was going to feel it. It was real. It did happen. I read from my pretty pink journal. I remember the beautiful butterflies, their different colors, blue, white, orange, black, purple, yellow, violet. They flew gently before landing on my hand. I remember the butterfly, so fragile and beautiful, I could never hurt a butterfly. And we are running through the trails being free. That's it. I made some tea and thought, maybe I should sit down and write it all out, just keep writing and writing. But I was too lazy to write. My notes had no order, so I continued to scribble pieces of memories, throwing the words into paper using different colored pens and dramatic paper colors just to be different. I could do anything I wanted. I was alone and grateful for the freedom to think. How small I had been back then, just a little girl. I tried not to remember the sadness and the pain, but only the love I had felt for my grandparents. I wondered if I'd ever grieved for them after they died. But I couldn't remember. I took a sip of tea and waited for that familiar emotional pain, but it didn't come. I smiled. Wow, no pain. I was tired of pain. I put the pink journal away in the drawer. And I'll just read one more little section here. If this is the one. Oh, okay. Okay. It is over, I said. I'm done. And you don't want to get help for your illness? I can't live with a man who doesn't love me and continues with disrespectful behavior and degradation against all women. You must do it to feel power and control, to feel good about who you are. There is no honor for me in our marriage. And that was it for me. I severed all contact. This time I got a restraining order because he threatened my life after I left. I finally had some peace. Finally, there was no drama, and I was happy and content being alone. After the breakup, I wrote on a napkin, only those that can stand up to make change can do it. Some can't and don't care to try, or do they? They will laugh at you to your face, or they haven't a fucking clue because they're in this fucking cycle of genocidal love. Hurt and pain is all they know. Terror, that's all I know. Is that it? It exists in their spirit, still trying to get out. No, it's easier to not feel, to walk around pilled up, sniffed up, on drugs or drunk, or to have sex with anyone. It's easier to not feel because you can't look after the children. I can't be responsible, can't, because they said I was a worthless, a stink savage, an evil, ugly pagan, and beat me some more. That's what I want. Hit me, spit on me, rape me, humiliate me, so you can pass it on to the next generation. So they too can laugh at it, belittle, and humiliate their kids. Put shame on them, terrorize them, and abandon them. Their kids will do the same to their kids. Genocidal love, is that what you want? Being the victim of genocide all the time, every day? Genocidal love will find you wherever you are. I transferred this from the napkin to my journal because I was going to create a painting or write a song about it someday. I woke up in my clean new bed in my clean home. I swiffered the hardwood floors over the weekend, and I loved how the clean floor felt under my feet. I was sick of attracting the wrong men. Love? That was not love. I decided to call my friend just to talk about my Swiffer. And I felt peace again, enjoying my bare feet on the clean floor. Others might take for granted something as simple as a clean floor, but it left me feeling overwhelmed with gratitude. The words flowed easily onto the piece of purple paper that I choose from the drawer, a simple thing called choice. The cycle broken and life begins. Is that cycle really broken? How is that life? How do you know your life is in a mess when this is the life you have grown up to believe? How do you change that life? How do you wash away the brainwash of myths and beliefs? How do you know, Myrtle? How do you know? I shivered and looked for my sweater. One of my exes had always told me to put a sweater on instead of cranking up the heat. Never mind a sweater, I thought, as I moved a thermostat as high as it would go. Damn it, this is my home.
Thank you for writing this book. It's so important to have that story down, and it takes a lot of bravery and strength to put it down. It takes a lot of bravery and strength to face trauma and work towards recovery, and I'm so sorry that happened to you. And I love that line, damn it, this is my home, because this is your home. We have questions, time for questions, and about 10 minutes. So while we're putting up the house lights, I'm just going to ask the question that I had. If I read an interview about why you chose to use Myrtle rather than writing it as nonfiction, would you answer that? Talk about that? The blend, how you blended fiction and nonfiction, and why?
I want to acknowledge University Press Regina for publishing this book. Why I had, at first it was all about, me written in the I, this, and you heard of the dispute resolution, applying for compensation for the damage done to children in a school. So I applied for that, and so we consulted with lawyers, and so we had to turn it to fiction based on true events. So that's how this came about. And in the clauses there, legally, it's mentioned not to speak negative about the church. So.
And this is the first book of a trilogy, and yours is also the first book of a trilogy. So just more books coming. We have time for questions. I see Glenn. Hi, Glenn. Any questions for any of our three writers? So quiet.
I'm shocked that we're here in person.
I know, isn't it wonderful? Yeah, so next year it's going to be right back to normal, and I can't wait. I hope, all fingers crossed.
I have a question.
Yep.
Do any of the authors know each other from before this event? The three of you seem very comfortable with each other.
I think we all met 5 minutes ago
Yes.
backstage. Right? None of us knew each other.
Nope.
Normally, I guess there would have been a Saskatchewan Books Award event, but there was
I saw
not
Bevann
this year.
in the newspaper.
You saw each other in the
I met you
newspaper.
there.
Yeah. Maybe you could talk a little bit about what the recognition of a Saskatchewan Book Awards means. I mean, it's nice that we have these provincial awards, and book coverage is less than it used to be, and festivals have disappeared for a couple of years, so that nod from a big book organization, I imagine, means a lot. So maybe you can tell us about finding out you're shortlisted and how you've responded.
I was driving home from work from Yorkton, and I got a text, and I kind of pulled over. And anyway, I had to pull over, and I was told I was up for these awards. And of course, I started to cry, and I was shaking. And then after, I thought, like, waiting for the awards, I thought, this is like the red carpet, when you win those, what do you call it, Globe Awards?
The Oscar.
The Oscars. It just felt like being acknowledged, like the truth, like somewhere inside, like there's this little Myrtle who's like, feels this overwhelming joy that she's being listened to and acknowledged and believed.
It's beautiful.
Yeah.
Gillian, do you remember getting the news for your last two books, I guess, that you were shortlisted?
Well, I was very pleased.
Yes.
Yes. It's nice to have, some validation for your work. So.
And Cort, you were funny backstage. You're like, I don't even know what I'm doing here. I was like, I can't even believe I'm here. So I imagine that you were surprised when you got the news based on your reaction backstage.
I was very surprised. So I also have to do a shout out to my publisher, Gabriel Dumont Institute. So the very fact that the name of my publisher is my relative is kind of cool. and writing the story and actually having them accept it was kind of the big thing, and I thought that's kind of where it would end. And then it was Karen Schmann, who was my publisher from Gabriel Dumont Institute, who called me and said that I was nominated for the Saskatchewan Book Awards, and that I should be honored just to be nominated, because it's such an amazing thing, and it's true. It is really kind of cool to be recognized, and it was my first book, you know, and so for that to happen and to go all the way the distance that it did, I'm pretty grateful.
Yeah, and Saskatchewan's such a vibrant place for the literary arts, so it's such a wonderful community. So to be included in that community with this recognition, their first time out of the gates, is very exciting. So congratulations to all three of you. And we do. Glenn has a question, and then we'll wrap up. Go, Glenn.
Okay, just a short one. I just felt so strongly as you read to us through the thoughts of Myrtle, and I wonder, in these times that we are, that it may be a very important time for many, many people in our history now. Do you have some optimism that by having people read your book and come to understanding that can be part of the healing process for people who have been through the residential school experience, but also a very important part of that is healing for people who are just learning about it and coming to have compassion and empathy? Do you see that as part of the process that comes from your book?
Absolutely. That's what my whole intent was, to educate people, and then the healing part too for even Indigenous people, everybody, because this is our country, right? This is our world, our society, and that was my hope too, that this book would reach readers that way and educate, help them be aware of what happened, the truth, and the healing that is possible to live happy and be healthy. So yeah, thank you for that.
Thank you all very much for coming to the first live event. Cort said the last event he was at before the pandemic hit was a concert here, and now this is his first event back in public. So yay Cultural Center, yay Moose Jaw. And there will be more live events through the weekend, as well as some online events for the next couple days, so keep an eye on the program. And thank you all for coming, and thanks to Sarah and the whole team for making this happen. And thanks most of all to all three of you, wonderful writers, and I look forward to following your career and your future books. Thank you. Will you hang out in front in case people want to meet you or have you sign their books? Yes, you will. So Tim is going to be selling books, right, Tim? Do I see Tim back there? Tim will be selling books out front, and these guys will be hanging around if you'd like some autographs.